The Independent Electoral Commission will today launch the 2021 local government elections. The IEC will also unveil its campaign to raise awareness amongst voters and stakeholders about the upcoming polls. The launch comes way ahead of Justice Dikgang Moseneke's deadline to release the results of his investigation into whether South Africa is ready to host the elections on the 27th of October. The former Deputy Chief Justice is scheduled to announce his findings next month following consultations with political parties and other stakeholders within the electoral sector. Political parties, including the EFF and the IFP, have been calling for the postponement of the local government elections to 2024. Natasha Phiri is covering that story for us, and we're going through to her now. Natasha, we spoke to you this morning. Not much was happening at that time. Are there any developments?
Well, Desiree, we're actually counting down to 11 o'clock where the program will actually start. But just to correct you there, the IFP has been calling for the postponement of the elections till next year, May 2022. And of course, the EFF has called for the amalgamation of both this upcoming local government elections with the general elections in 2024. But to talk us more through today's programs, I'm joined by one of the IEC's top officials, Mr. Mawethu Mosery, and we'll just talk about today and other issues that pertaining to the Independent Electoral Commission. Thank you so much for joining us on SABC News. Are you elated about today? Can you tell us about today's program?
Well, good morning, Natasha, and your viewers. Today, as the Electoral Commission, we basically launch our communications campaign to ensure that we reach every South African citizen who's eligible to vote and encourage them to go register and be on the voters' roll. And it would be part of our campaign line towards the general elections when they take place. So it is a major communication program, but also we start to indicate the likely time frame that will take us to the election itself.
Mr. Mosery, you talk about time frames. You've received criticism, and you're well aware of it right now, from the Inkatha Freedom Party, saying that it was quite premature for the Commission to have this launch ahead of Justice Moseneke's report, as you know that he's investigating whether elections are to be held conducively in a free and fair manner, especially under these current COVID times.
Natasha, we've indicated before that as the Electoral Commission, we've got to be compliant with the legal framework of the country, and we prepare the elections in terms of that legal framework, which then directs us. The end of the term is 5 years, which is the 3rd of August, and we have 90 days during which an election must take place. So we need, as an electoral body, to prepare for an election to take place within the 90 days, bar all other things we are alert to in the environment, socio-political environment in the country, and indeed the pandemic that we're dealing with, which is throwing a number of curveballs in the normal free space of campaigning.
We'll talk about the curveballs a bit later, but Mr. Mosery, I think the question on everybody's mind, let's just say this report that everybody's anticipating or waiting for on the 21st of July comes out and says the country is not ready right now to hold elections. What then needs to happen?
At that point, the report will go to the Commission, and the Commission will then consider the report, and if the Commission agrees with the recommendation of the report, it will then take the necessary steps and the decision. Let's say, for argument, the report suggests that elections are delayed. Then the Commission will look at mechanism to say that how do the courts or the laws of the country allow for that delay. It would not be an automatic commission decision alone. Certainly we'll have to approach the courts of the country to get an order that agrees with the recommendation of the report and the decision of the Commission. In that way, it involves all South African citizens, and it's in the interest of South African citizens, whichever decision is taken post the report. But we are not as yet sure because it's at the early stage of this assessment and inquiry. Whether the report will indeed come out saying the election shouldn't proceed. So we'll wait for the process to unfold, as well as also be alert to the developments around the pandemic in the main.
But is the IEC ready for any eventuality?
At this stage, we're progressing very well in our preparations for the elections to take place within the time frame, and we are on schedule in terms of that. Hence the registration weekend on the 17th and 18th of July, and then we have a whole program taking us to the proposed date at this stage. So we are certainly comfortable on that score. It certainly issues beyond the logistics and the infrastructure of the elections that will make us not have the election as scheduled.
I mean, let's talk about the National Party Liaison Committee. I mean, this has actually come under the spotlight. And once again, for viewers who don't know what the National Party Liaison Committee is, these are political parties who are represented in the National Assembly, those 14 political parties. And now you've also received some criticism from them, not only just now, but in times past. We know that the EFF had spearheaded a proposal and had engaged with other political parties that form part of the NPLC. Wanting for or hoping that these local government elections would be combined with the general elections. We also heard the IFP asking for postponements till next year. What were the differing views in this committee before the president actually made the announcement that the polls or the country would head to the polls on the 27th of October? Because, I mean, you find some political parties are also now emerging saying that, listen, we're not happy with this decision.
Well, the National Party Liaison is made up of the represented political parties in our national legislature as well as in provincial legislatures. The regulation that creates the National Party Liaison Committee does allow us to co-opt other political players or key stakeholders. In that instance, we may have co-opted one or two other parties that are not necessarily represented in our legislature. Now, the discussion on the delay of the election or the postponement of the election began in January this year, and the matter has been in the discussions of the NPLC. We proceeded on a monthly basis to discuss it, and then in April we actually had a session with party leaders who were also endorsing some of the submissions that we had already received from political parties. Just from the 16 political parties that we sit with at the National Party Liaison, they are almost split 50-50 in terms of those who say the election must proceed as things are, and those who are saying the things as they stand create an environment where a free election is not possible, given the restrictions around the state of disaster in the country, and that's been the argument. Now, with that kind of a split input, it was then necessary for the Commission to draw on an extraordinary arrangement of this assessment by the judge, to say an independent person who's not part of the Electoral Commission and who has the requisite skills, can they assess the environment and give us a different view, having had all the key experts as well as the key players in the political space. So that's the process that we have undertaken, and we'll take the report and consider it and share it with the NPLC before we make the final decision of the Commission.
Mr. Mosery, let's now talk about voter education. The country, correct me if I'm wrong, has about over 25 million registered voters, with Gauteng topping those numbers, having over 3 million registered voters. In 2019, the election campaign, which was themed Excel, was centered around, encouraging young people, the youth, to actually vote. Is this in current day times, is the IEC also focusing on young voters, on first-time voters? In terms of first-time voters, I've been covering the IEC for a while right now, and there seems to be a lack of voter education. You have questions right now from young people not understanding how important these municipal elections are. Perhaps if you'll just shortly differentiate between, the general elections and the municipal elections.
Well, the difference between the two elections is basically that we have a government in this country with three spheres. Sphere number one is local government, which is close to us in our residential areas where we live, and it therefore becomes important to talk neighborhood issues, community issues that are in close proximity to us, but then it relates to key service deliveries to those areas where we live, your sanitation, your waste removal, your roads. And then you have your provincial government, which is the second sphere, and the third sphere is national government. So national government and provincial government, we elect them at the same time. But when we come to local government, it becomes a different general election, which allows us to choose people for wards in terms of who they are and the parties that they associate with, or they are independents, and then we choose also PR councillors.
And in line with that, could you please explain extensively for those viewers who don't know what PR councillors are?
Well, PR councillors are those councillors elected on party list into the sitting in council. They are put on the list by the political party on priority basis, who's the best leader who goes into council. Their focus is broad for the whole municipality because they represent the municipal interest, whereas the ward councillor is elected on a winner takes all. With one vote, you win a ward and you become a councillor. And your major focus and responsibility is the community of the ward that elected you to be the ward councillor. So that's the difference between the two councillors. But in terms of the broader responsibility when they're sitting in council, you don't differentiate them as ward councillors and PR councillors. You treat them as the whole council, and they debate issues as the whole council, particularly issues of community development and service delivery.
Mr. Mosery, last question from me, because I know you have to leave. What can we expect from today's program? Just also please take us through the program, because we haven't received a manual one as yet.
Well, today we will basically set the scene of this particular general election, how it is affecting the election preparation, what we expect from voters, how they should be behaving, participating in this election that we have in the space where we are accepted that it will be during a COVID time. And then second, after that, we will have an outline of the preparations towards the proposed time frame of this election, and it will be in detail. And then the last thing we will do is to launch the visuals of this campaign, the messages of this campaign, and we'll also explain why the message is like this, why it is focusing on this particular sector of our community, and the kind of message and the kind of encouragement we're sending out there.
Mr. Mosery, thank you so much for your time. Always a pleasure having you on the SABC.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, Desiree, I know our agenda viewers, there you have it from Mr. Mawethu Mosery talking to us about, everything about elections, about today's all-important program, which is set to start any time from now at 11 o'clock. And, of course, various political parties will also be present here today, just talking to us extensively, the difference between your normal ward councillors and your PR councillors, saying that the Commission has its work cut out out for it, and also talking to us about the processes of Justice Moseneka's report, which will be delivered on the 21st of July. Of course, you know that inquiry that he has set up from last month is still busy, soliciting views from various stakeholders, including political parties. They've had that meeting with the NPLC. They've also yet to have the meeting with the Minister of Cota, with the Ministry of Health, and other various electoral key stakeholders. The IEC is also meant to make their presentations before the end of this month. And of course, like I said in our earlier crossing, that viewers and all those who at home, the public at large, can actually make their contributions by the 18th of July. And of course, if you want to make your contributions and are interested and keen, please do send your submissions to freeandfair@elections.org.za. But of course, we promise you, as the SABC, which is launched here at the Sandton Convention Center, to give you all the latest in regards to this launch as they actually prepare to get on stage anytime from now. As for me, it's back to you in studio, Desiree.
Thank you so much, Natasha. Actually, our question of the day is linked to this conversation, where we're asking you as our viewer, do you think South Africa should be engaging in elections in a COVID-19 year, or while we're in the midst of a pandemic?